The night Elara Whitmore was given away, she didn't cry. She stood very still in the center of the marble foyer, her hands folded over her stomach the way she'd learned to do when she wanted to disappear. The chandelier above her burned too bright, casting light on every curve her father despised, every inch of her body he had taught her to hate. Across from her, her father signed his name with shaking hands, not from fear for her but fear for himself. "She's yours," he said flatly, sliding the contract across the table. "Take her. Clear my debt." Elara felt something inside her finally break, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a thread snapping after being pulled too tight for too many years. She was 23 years old, kind to a fault, and had spent her life trying to be smaller than she was. Smaller in voice, smaller in dreams, smaller in presence. But her body had never obeyed, and her father had never forgiven her for it. The man standing opposite him did not rush to sign. He was tall, unnaturally still, dressed in black like the night had learned to walk. His eyes, ancient, violet, unreadable, lifted slowly from the paper to Elara's face. Not her body. Her face. That alone made her chest tighten. "You are offering your daughter," the man said calmly, "as punishment?" "She's a burden," her father snapped. "Too big. Too visible. No man wants her. She humiliates this family just by existing." Elara stared at the floor. She had heard these words before. In private. In public. In whispers meant to wound. The Vampire King turned fully toward her then. For centuries he had been feared. Worshipped. Avoided. Entire bloodlines had vanished at his command. And yet, when he looked at her, his expression did not hold hunger. It held something far more dangerous. Recognition. "What is your name?" he asked her. Elara hesitated. Her father answered for her, annoyed. "Elara. But it doesn't matter." "It matters," the Vampire King said softly. She lifted her gaze, bracing herself for disgust. Instead she saw stillness. Control. A restraint so deep it felt like a promise. "Elara," he repeated, tasting the sound. "Do you know why you are being offered to me?" She swallowed. "Because I'm expendable." The air shifted. The lights flickered. Her father laughed nervously. "She understands. Sign the contract." The Vampire King did sign, but not before adding a clause of his own. When the ink dried, Elara Whitmore no longer belonged to her father. She belonged to a kingdom. The journey to the vampire stronghold took hours. Mountains rose like black teeth against the sky, fog swallowing the road until Elara felt like she was being erased from the world she knew. She expected chains. She expected a cell. She expected to die. Instead, she was given a cloak to shield her from the cold, and silence, heavy but not cruel. When the gates opened, she saw a fortress carved into stone and shadow, ancient and alive, watching her as closely as she watched it. Inside, servants bowed, not to her, but they did not avert their eyes either. Confusion curled in her chest. The Vampire King led her himself. "You will stay in the East Wing," he said. "You will not be harmed." She stopped walking. "Why?" Her voice trembled despite her effort. "You don't even know me." He turned. "I know enough," he replied. "You were traded like property, yet you stood with dignity. You were humiliated, yet you did not beg." She laughed weakly. "I didn't beg because I learned early that it never worked." His jaw tightened. "In this kingdom," he said, "no one is punished for taking up space." Her eyes burned. No one had ever said that to her before. That night, Elara lay in a bed softer than anything she had ever known, staring at the ceiling, waiting for fear to catch up to her. Instead, something else arrived. Safety. And that terrified her more than chains ever could. Because safety meant hope. And hope, she had learned, was dangerous. Elara did not sleep the first night. She lay awake beneath layers of velvet and silk, listening to the wind claw at the stone walls of the fortress, listening to the distant echo of a place that did not belong to humans. Every sound felt too sharp, too loud, like the world was testing whether she deserved to exist inside it. By morning, exhaustion weighed on her bones, but she forced herself out of bed anyway. She had survived worse. A maid arrived with a tray of food, warm bread, fruit, something sweet dusted with sugar. Elara stared at it in disbelief. "This is for me?" she asked quietly. The maid nodded, not unkindly. "The king instructed it himself." The word king still didn't feel real. Elara ate slowly, waiting for guilt to arrive. Waiting for someone to burst in and tell her she had taken too much, that she didn't deserve abundance. No one came. Later that afternoon she was summoned, not commanded, summoned, to the great hall. Her hands trembled as she walked through towering doors carved with symbols older than memory. The hall was vast, cold, and beautiful in a way that made her feel painfully human. And it was full. Vampires lined the chamber like living statues, elegant, sharp, impossibly composed. Their eyes turned toward her the moment she entered. The whispering began immediately. She heard it all. Is that her? She's enormous. A human like that? Why hasn't he fed yet? Elara felt her shoulders fold inward instinctively, years of habit guiding her body into retreat. She tried to focus on the floor, on her breathing, on not running. Then the room fell silent. He had entered. The vampire king moved like a shadow given purpose. His presence didn't demand attention, it took it. He walked to the throne without looking at anyone else, then turned his gaze toward her. Elara, he said calmly. Come here. Her legs barely worked but she obeyed. Every step felt like a test. Every breath felt borrowed. When she reached him he did something unexpected. He stood. That alone sent a ripple through the court. You will sit beside me, he said. A murmur broke out, sharp and angry. She froze. I don't think. You do, he replied evenly, extending his hand. She took it. The moment her fingers touched his skin, something shifted. The whispers stopped. The tension thickened. He guided her to the throne, not behind him, not below him, but beside him. Elara sat, heart pounding, aware of every eye dissecting her existence. This is Elara, the king announced to the court. She is under my protection. A thin, venomous laugh cut through the silence. Protection? A voice sneered. From what, exactly? Manners? Mirrors? The speaker stepped forward, a tall, elegant vampire woman with eyes like polished glass. Elara flinched. The insult was familiar. Too familiar. The king did not raise his voice. Repeat that, he said. The woman smiled cruelly. I said she hardly fits the image of this court. Elara's chest tightened. She waited for the laughter. For the humiliation to fully bloom. Instead the air dropped 10 degrees. This court, the king said slowly, exists because I allow it to. The woman stiffened. You will address her with respect, he continued, or you will leave. The vampire scoffed. She's human. And oversized. That was when Elara spoke. I can hear you, she said quietly. The room stilled. Her voice shook but she did not look away. I've heard worse, she continued. From people who mattered less. Shock rippled through the chamber. The king turned to her, not angry. Not surprised. Proud. The woman opened her mouth again but the king raised one finger. You are dismissed, he told her. Forever. Guards moved instantly. As the woman was dragged away, Elara's hands trembled violently in her lap. She had expected cruelty. She had not expected justice. After the court dispersed, Elara sat alone in the quiet that followed, her body finally betraying her fear. She shook, unable to stop. The king knelt in front of her. I did not bring you here to suffer, he said gently. She laughed weakly. I don't know how not to expect it. His expression darkened, not with anger but with grief. Your world taught you cruelty was normal, he said. This one will teach you otherwise. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. I don't understand why you care, she whispered. I don't have beauty or power or... You have survived, he interrupted. That is not nothing. He stood and offered her his arm. Walk with me. They moved through the halls together, the distance between them shrinking not through touch but presence. He told her stories, not of war or blood but of loneliness, of centuries spent feared but never known. You are not weak, he said at last. You were simply unsupported. That night as she returned to her room, Elara realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life, someone powerful had chosen her, not despite who she was but because of it. And far away beyond the fortress walls, her father learned where his daughter now lived. And he wanted her back. The letter arrived at dawn. Elara was in the gardens when the messenger found her, a vast stretch of stone paths and winter-bare trees overlooking the ocean far below. She had come there to breathe, to feel something solid beneath her feet, to remind herself that this life was real and not some fragile dream waiting to shatter. The parchment trembled in the messenger's hand. It bears a human seal, he said carefully. The king has not yet seen it. Elara knew before she touched it. Her fingers went numb. The crest burned into the wax, familiar, ugly, unavoidable. Her father. She stared at the letter for a long time before opening it. When she finally did, the words inside cut deeper than any blade. You were never meant to stay. The debt was never truly settled. Return yourself quietly or the consequences will be severe. Her vision blurred. She had known, somewhere deep inside, that freedom would never be handed to her without cost. Men like her father did not let go of what they believed they owned. She folded the letter carefully, hands shaking, and turned back toward the castle. She would not hide this. The king read the letter without interruption. His face remained still, but Elara felt the shift in the room like pressure building before a storm. He has no claim, the king said at last. You are under my protection. Elara swallowed. He never cared about claims before. The king's jaw tightened. He will not touch you, he said. But he will try, she replied softly. That was when the king looked at her, not as something fragile to shield, but as someone standing at the edge of a choice. What do you want? He asked. The question stunned her. No one had ever asked her that without an agenda attached. I don't want to be traded again, she said. I don't want to disappear because someone decided I was inconvenient. He nodded once. Then you won't. Her father arrived 2 days later. He did not come alone. The human delegation entered the great hall with forced confidence, dressed in expensive suits that failed to hide their fear. Elara stood beside the king, her heart hammering so violently she wondered if everyone could hear it. Richard Whitmore looked at her the same way he always had, like something that had embarrassed him by surviving. You look well-fed, he said. The insult landed, sharp and practiced. Elara did not lower her eyes. I'm safe, she replied. Her father laughed. Safe? You're a bargaining chip in a monster's house. The king spoke then, his voice calm but lethal. You are addressing someone under my protection. Richard scoffed. Protection ends when contracts are challenged. I've come to renegotiate. Elara felt the room tilt. I'm not for sale, she said. Her father's smile vanished. You don't get to decide that. Something inside her finally snapped. I do now. Silence fell. Her father stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, and hating what he saw. You owe me, he hissed. Everything you have exists because of me. Elara stepped forward. No, she said. Everything I survived happened because of you. The words trembled but they did not break. The king placed himself beside her, not in front of her, not behind her. With her. This negotiation is over, he said. Leave. Richard's face twisted. You think she matters to you? She's weak. She'll disappoint you like she disappointed me. Elara waited for the king to respond. Instead she spoke. I was never weak, she said. I was just unloved. Her father flinched. The king's hand brushed hers, not possessive, not claiming. Grounding. That night Elara broke. The weight of confrontation crashed down on her all at once. Years of swallowed words, of being reduced to a number on a scale, to an inconvenience, everything spilled out in shaking sobs she could not stop. The king did not touch her at first. He sat with her. I don't know how to be brave, she admitted. I just know how to endure. Endurance, he said quietly, is a form of courage most never learn. She looked at him then, not as a rescuer but as someone who understood loneliness. Why are you still alone? She asked. His expression darkened. Because power makes people love what you are, he replied. Not who you are. The words hung heavy between them. She reached out, hesitant, uncertain, and rested her hand against his arm. Then we're both learning, she said. The contact sent something dangerous through him, something he had not felt in centuries. Hope. Later that night, Elara stood alone on her balcony, staring into the dark. She had stood up to her father. She had not been taken. She had not been erased. And for the first time she realized something else. She was no longer asking to be protected. She was choosing to stay. Far below, the ocean roared like a warning. The war for her autonomy had only just begun. The attack came at dusk. It did not announce itself with screams or alarms. It arrived quietly, hidden beneath ceremony and tradition, wrapped in the illusion of diplomacy. Elara felt it before anyone else did. The great hall was filled again, banners hanging from stone pillars. The court gathered for what the king had called a necessary reaffirmation of loyalty. Vampires stood in their ranks, composed and elegant, while human envoys watched nervously from the edges. Everything looked controlled. Too controlled. Elara stood beside the king, her posture calm, her heart anything but. Something in the air felt wrong, thick, metallic, like a storm pressing down on her chest. She leaned closer to him. Something's wrong. He glanced at her. You sense it too? She nodded. Before she could speak again, one of the elders stepped forward, a vampire whose smile never reached his eyes. A gift, the elder said smoothly, presenting a goblet filled with dark liquid. A ceremonial blend. To honor unity. The king's hand reached for it. Elara, she whispered. It was instinct. Nothing more. But instinct had kept her alive her entire life. She grabbed his wrist. The room gasped. The king stilled. Slowly he looked at her. Don't drink it, she said. Her voice shook, but her grip didn't. Please. The elder's eyes flashed. How dare a human? The king raised one finger. Explain, he said to Elara. She stared at the goblet. It smells wrong. Not like wine. Not like blood. Like decay. Silence stretched. The king gestured to a guard. Test it. Seconds later, the goblet hit the floor, shattered. Poison. The court erupted. Chaos exploded across the hall as accusations flew and guards moved. The elder who had presented the drink lunged, but not at the king. At Elara. She didn't scream. She moved. Years of being cornered, mocked, threatened, her body reacted before fear could catch her. She twisted away, stumbled, and hit the stone floor hard. Pain shot through her hip, but she didn't stop. The king roared. The sound shook the fortress. The attacker was dead before he hit the ground. Silence followed, thick and terrified. The king knelt beside Elara instantly, his hands hovering, shaking with restrained panic. Are you hurt? He demanded. I am okay, she lied. Her leg throbbed. Her palms burned. But she forced herself upright. I told you, she said weakly. Something was wrong. He stared at her like she had just rewritten history. You saved my life, he said. She swallowed. I just listened. The court fell to their knees. Not because they were ordered. Because they had witnessed it. That night, the fortress buzzed with fear and awe. The attempted assassination sent shockwaves through the vampire territories. Whispers followed Elara everywhere she went, not cruel this time. Reverent. She sensed poison. She protected him. She didn't run. Elara retreated to the balcony, her body aching, her mind overwhelmed. The king found her there. You should be resting, he said quietly. So should you, she replied. He smiled faintly. They stood side by side watching the moon climb the sky. You did something today, he said. Something no one has done for me in centuries. She hugged herself. I was just afraid of losing the only place that's ever felt safe. His chest tightened. This place is safe because of you now. She looked at him startled. I am feared, he continued. Respected. Obeyed. But today, I was cared for. Emotion flickered across his face, raw, unguarded. I don't know how to repay that. She shook her head. You already did. You treated me like I mattered before I ever proved it. The truth of that hit him harder than any blade. Slowly, carefully, he took her hand. She didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, not in passion, not yet. In trust. Later, as Elara lay in bed, pain finally catching up to her, she realized something terrifying. The king no longer just protected her. He needed her. And power like his had enemies everywhere. The rebellion did not rise in secret. It rose in whispers, then murmurs, then open defiance. Elara felt it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. In the way guards doubled outside her chambers. In the way the king's advisors watched her, not with cruelty but calculation. She had saved him. And now she was dangerous. You should stay inside the inner wing, the king told her one evening, his voice carefully neutral. Until this settles. She studied his face. You're afraid for me, she said. I'm afraid because of you, he admitted. The honesty startled her more than anger ever could. They will come for you, he continued. Not because they hate you, but because they know I care. The words settled heavy in her chest. Care. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was close enough to burn. I won't hide, she said quietly. His eyes darkened. Elara. I spent my entire life shrinking so others could feel comfortable, she interrupted. I won't do that here. Not now. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotion. Finally he nodded. Then you will stand with me, he said. Openly. The challenge came 3 nights later. The council chamber filled with elders, their expressions cold, composed, and openly hostile. Elara walked beside the king, her spine straight, her heart pounding. An elder rose. She endangers the crown, he said bluntly. Your judgment is compromised. Elara's chest tightened. She saved his life, another countered. And became his weakness, the first snapped. The king's voice cut through the argument. If protecting her is weakness, he said, then I accept it. Gasps filled the chamber. Elara turned to him sharply. You don't have to. Yes, I do, he said softly. I will not rule by sacrificing what is right. The elders exchanged glances. Then choose, one demanded. The girl, or the throne? Elara felt the world tilt. This was her fault. She stepped forward. I'll leave, she said. If it keeps peace. The king's head snapped toward her. No. She met his gaze. I won't be the reason your people suffer. You are the reason they are learning, he replied fiercely. He turned back to the council. I choose her. Silence crashed down like a broken cathedral. You would abandon your crown? An elder whispered. I would redefine it, the king said. A kingdom built on cruelty deserves to fall. Elara's breath caught. He was choosing her. Not as a possession. As a principle. That night the fortress shook. Rebels struck fast, targeting the inner wing. Elara ran, not away but toward the danger. She found the king wounded, blood dark against stone. Fear seized her heart. She knelt beside him, pressing her hands to his injury, tears blurring her vision. Stay with me, she begged. He smiled weakly. You're braver than you believe. Guards arrived, driving the attackers back. When it was over, Elara stayed by his side, refusing to leave. The kingdom held its breath. By dawn the rebellion had failed. And by sunrise the elders knelt. The court gathered again, but this time they bowed to her first. Not because of fear. Because she had become inevitable. The king stood beside her, no longer just ruler, but partner. You changed everything, he told her quietly. She shook her head. We did. The kingdom did not celebrate immediately. After rebellion, after bloodshed, after centuries of cruelty exposed to the light, celebration felt dishonest. What came first was silence. A heavy, thoughtful silence that settled over the fortress like snow. Elara felt it everywhere she walked. In the corridors where servants paused to bow, not out of fear but respect. In the council chamber where elders watched her closely, no longer deciding whether she belonged, but how much she would change. In herself. Because the girl who had once apologized for breathing too loudly was gone. And in her place stood a woman who had survived being unwanted. The council convened at dawn. Stone seats filled the circular chamber, ancient symbols glowing faintly beneath torchlight. The vampire king sat at the head, but Elara sat beside him, not as a guest, not as property, not as protection. As equal. The elders argued fiercely. Some clung to tradition like a weapon. Others spoke of fear. Fear of change, fear of losing control, fear of a human influencing immortal rule. Elara listened. She always listened first. Then she stood. I was raised to believe silence was obedience, she said. That if I didn't complain, cruelty would pass me by. It never did. The chamber stilled. I was humiliated not because I was weak, she continued, but because I was different, and difference frightens people who benefit from sameness. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. I will not rule by fear, she said, and I will not survive another kingdom built on it. Some elders looked away. Others bowed their heads. The laws that followed were unprecedented. Humans gained protections. Blood bonds were regulated. No being, human or vampire, could be traded, owned, or punished for existing differently. The kingdom resisted. Then it adapted. 3 days later Richard Whitmore arrived. He came without arrogance this time. His clothes were worn. His posture bent. The man who once called his daughter a burden now stood trembling before the throne. Elara, he said, voice cracking. You owe me a conversation. She stepped down slowly. I don't owe you anything, she replied. But I will give you closure. He scoffed weakly. You think you're better than me now? She met his eyes. No, she said. I think I survived you. The court watched as decades of power drained from the man. You were ashamed of me, Elara continued. Not because of my body, but because I reminded you of your failures. His face twisted. You were never small, she said. You just made me feel that way so you wouldn't have to. Richard tried to speak. The king raised his hand. Judgment was passed. Not death. Not torture. Exile. To live without power. Without audience. Without someone to blame. As Richard was led away, Elara felt something unexpected. Relief. Not revenge. The coronation came under a full moon. The sky was clear. The air still. Elara wore a gown not meant to hide her, but to honor her. Fabric flowing, unrestricted, powerful. No corsets. No shame. The crown was placed in her hands. Not on her head. She lifted it herself. The vampire king knelt before her. A king kneeling, not in surrender but devotion. "You taught me what power should protect," he said quietly. "And what love should never demand." Emotion tightened her throat. "You saw me when no one else did," she whispered. "And you never asked me to change." He rose. "I love you," he said, not as a promise. As a truth already lived. She took his hands. "And I choose you," she said. "Not because you are a king, but because you are kind." The crowd erupted. Not in fear. In loyalty. That night, Elara stood on the balcony, the kingdom spread before her like a living thing. She thought of the girl she had been, the one who believed taking up space was a crime. She smiled. She had learned otherwise.